You're traveling through another dimension, not only of sight and sound, but of products in 800 numbers. A journey into a land whose boundaries are those of your credit card. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Sci-Fi Trader Zone. A place where amazing insights await you. Case in point, author of the Twilight Zone Companion, Marc Scott Zicree.
I came upon a box that was unmarked, no notice of what was in it, and I opened it up, and inside it was filled with scripts. And they were scripts for the Twilight Zone that had been written but never made.
And submitted for your consideration. We'll enter the secret world of 007, which will leave you shaken, not stirred. All this and more awaits you in the Trader Zone. Hi, I'm Warren James, and welcome to The Trader. One of the most famous science fiction shows of all time, The Twilight Zone, has just joined our roster and from now on can be seen on the Sci-Fi Channel exclusively, every day at 7 and 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And on January 1st, start your new year off right with the Twilight Zone Marathon, beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern until 3 a.m. the next morning. Now, on today's episode of The Trader, we're going to look back at the Twilight Zone and showcase some great Twilight Zone products. We're also going to chat with author Lee Pfeiffer about everybody's favorite secret agent, James Bond, and offer a dynamic book about 007. Plus, we have a hot new cyberpunk computer game, and we'll show you how to give your computer a Star Trek flair. My first guest, some of you may have met here before, but in honor of the Twilight Zone's debut on the channel, here's an encore appearance by one of the foremost authorities on the Twilight Zone, Marc Scott Zicree, author of the highly acclaimed book, The Twilight Zone Companion. Marc, you're a really busy screenwriter, and I'm glad you could take some time out because you're working on 5 shows now.
Yes, all fantasy, science fiction-oriented shows, filming on various continents.
And so you were able to take a little time out to join us on The Trader.
Yeah, I get to blow up a lot of stuff, and then I came here to sit in a comfortable chair and talk.
And talk about something we love. By the way, I saw you brought in a neat bit of wardrobe from the Twilight Zone.
Yes, this is actually quite a rarity. This is from a Twilight Zone episode called Death Ship that was written by Richard Matheson and stars Ross Martin and Jack Klugman as astronauts who land on an alien planet and confront their own crashed ship, a duplicate of their own ship that's crashed, and their own dead bodies inside. And I was in a store last year, and I came upon this, and this is the actual costume used in the episode, and I just said, well, I can't walk out of the shop without that under my arm. So
it's a great piece of wardrobe.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you've been in love with the Twilight Zone like a lot of us for many years. In fact, we're coming up on the 35th anniversary of the debut of the Twilight Zone.
It still holds up. You can still watch it and not feel like you're looking at history.
Right. And now, when you were writing your book, The Twilight Zone Companion, which is a really great book, I really liked it.
Thanks, Ron.
What kind of surprises did you run into when you were researching it?
I got the singular joy of being able to crawl through Rod Serling's attic and poke through his scrapbooks and his files and boxes. This is late 1970s, early 80s. And I came upon a box that was unmarked, no notice of what was in it, and I opened it up, and inside it was filled with scripts. And they were scripts for the Twilight Zone that had been written but never made, and they were scripts by Serling, Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, 2 by Ray Bradbury, and it was marvelous. It was really marvelous.
Has anyone talked about filming them?
Well, interestingly enough, one of them, which was a lovely script by Matheson called The Doll, which is not the one that people know from the Twilight Zone.
That was one with Telly Savalas, wasn't it?
That's right, Talkie Tina, which was called Living Doll by Charles Beaumont. This script by Matheson was later made as an episode of Amazing Stories some 20 years later and starred John Lithgow. Lithgow won an Emmy for it.
You know, when Rod Serling started the Twilight Zone, he was a really well-respected TV writer. He'd written a number of things, won awards, and then he goes off to make this science fiction show. Why did he decide to make a science fiction show? And also, how were people reacting to it?
In the 1950s, Serling was, by the time that Paddy Chayefsky left television, Serling was the undisputed king of TV writers. There was no one who could match him. He'd already won Emmys for Patterns and Requiem for a Heavyweight. But he was increasingly frustrated because he would want to write things about politics, about social issues, about racism, and the sponsors who ran the TV shows during that period would insist that anything that smacked of controversy be taken out. And it could be as ludicrous as, for instance, there was one show that was sponsored by Ford, and a skyline of New York had the Chrysler building painted out of it. That was, you know, how picayune they could be. But on the major issues, Serling felt increasingly constrained. And at one point, after he wrote some piece about the Congress, some show, he said, it was so empty of meaning that I would have done better if I'd made everyone an android and said it in the 21st century, because then I could have said what I wanted to say. And it was like the light bulb went off in his head, and he realized that if he wrote a science fiction show, he could write about what he cared about and get his point across.
And science fiction has often done that for us, or even
Yes.
people like Jonathan Swift,
Yes.
Gulliver's Travels, which kind of showed that you could say almost anything and the king wouldn't cut your head off
Yes.
if he didn't think you were talking about him.
Yeah, it's true.
What was so special and unique about the Twilight Zone? How was it that he actually managed to get away with it? Because he still had message stories.
Yes, but I think a lot of people weren't paying attention. You know, it's sort of like the people who would have noticed on some of his bigger things weren't watching Twilight Zone by and large, I think. But more than that, I think what made it special was the fact that prior to Twilight Zone, the fantasy and science fiction series were about the gimmick. They weren't about observing life and commenting on life. And Serling had something very specific to say, and he wasn't just writing about the gimmick. And I think that's what made it special.
It was a very special show, and Mark, you make the stories come alive. Thanks. Well, now here are some products that will transport you from your living room right into the Twilight Zone. Darla?
Celebrating the premiere of The Twilight Zone, airing daily at 7 and 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the Sci-Fi Channel, the Trader has put together a fantastic Twilight Zone package. The best of the Twilight Zone music CD and this Twilight Zone t-shirt, both together are yours for just $29.95 in a call to the Trader.
This rare Twilight Zone compilation CD has not only the legendary main title theme by Marius Constant, but it also features music from such stellar episodes as The Invaders and Nervous Man in a $4 Room by composer Jerry Goldsmith, along with I Sing the Body Electric and Where Is Everybody by the legendary Bernard Herrmann, plus many others. You'll also receive these liner notes chronicling not only the music's background, but also a synopsis of the episodes covered. Hearing these scores in stereo directly from the original masters is a real treat.
The Twilight Zone t-shirt, for days when you feel like you're living in the Twilight Zone. It features the Twilight Zone logo with icons from the opening title sequence. What better way to seep yourself into those haunting storylines than slipping into one of these? It's a beefy tee and 100% cotton. Your checkbook or credit card is a passport into another dimension. The Twilight Zone package, the best of the Twilight Zone CD and the Twilight Zone t-shirt for just $29.95. Back to you, Warren.
Thanks, Darla. Now, don't go away. When we come back, we're going to enter the world of Secret Agent 007.